And we're live. Yay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're here for episode 7 of How to Thrive as Human in an AI World. We've got Philip Horvath joining us today. Add some life and curiosity and creativity to our conversation. Yeah, we're I don't know. Philip, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and I'll do my very best to add life and creativity to this episode. My name is Philip. I'm a passionate researcher of the human operating system and how we function as humans. And I also get to now teach that to leaders around the world, and in the context of mostly innovation, leadership, transformation, those kind of things. So.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Simo and I are happy to have you join us. You and I met originally when I was living in Berlin. So yeah, nice to see you. Unfortunately not live today, but good to see you again. So yeah, so today we were going to talk about creativity. You had written a post announcing this, I think it was announcing this, your participation in this, talking about the 7 kinds of intelligence. So maybe we should start there.
Oh, awesome.
Tell us about the 7. I'm not sure that I could list 7.
Well, good. Well, let's start with maybe a couple of working definitions. For me, intelligence is a facility that allows us to perceive, process, and produce information, right? And as such, information can be all kinds of things. It can be chemical, it can be emotional, it can be semantic, relational, symbolic, on all kinds of different levels. And this idea of multiple intelligences, I think the first one who proclaimed it was Howard Gardner, a cognitive scientist and psychologist. And he talked about different intelligences, even like musical intelligence and creative intelligence. And then over the last years, the notion of emotional intelligence became very popular, because we realized it's something different from processing symbols and information. And, I've been studying different various, wisdom traditions from around the world for decades now. Always fascinated with, how does this function? It started with when I was a kid. I was, they called it in Germany, called it Zappel Philipp, which means fidgety Philip. Today you would say ADHD. And so when I was about 12, my dad said, dude, you need to learn how to chill. He gave me a whole bunch of yoga and meditation tapes. So I started learning meditation and yoga then led me to more and more different traditions from around the world. And I've drank jungle juices with shamans in South America and studied with gurus in India and hung out with neo-shamans and alchemists in California, and always looking at how does this function? And what I found is that there's very similar models around the world, whether you go to the Eastern world with chakras or whether you go to Pythagoras and the octave system, there's obviously 7, and 7 to 8, right? And I was very deeply influenced by Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson, who kind of also codified this notion. And in this sense, it's also funny enough, we can apparently remember 7 things in our RAM in terms of our memory, working memory. So more than 7 things we start forgetting. But most systems around the world have either 4, right? The 4 elements of fire, water, air, earth, or maybe 5, or maybe 10. So there's some cognitive structures that seem to lend themselves to building models around that. And I like to quote George Box a lot, who says that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And what I found very useful is this model of these 7 intelligences. And if you think about that, call it different circuitry also. If you think about like a computer has a motherboard, but it also has an I/O board and a graphics card. So there's distinct circuitry with different functions. And if you look at kind of how life evolved, first, sort of intelligence that's out there that's measurable is plant intelligence, right? There's chemical intelligence, you're processing chemical information, right? And even a slime mold, right? This very simple organism can learn a maze, for example, right? So there seems to be intelligence on a physical level in our body, right? And there's some pretty amazing what our body does in terms of homeostasis and, pumping blood and lymph nodes and all these different things that are going on in the system. Pretty amazing intelligence right there. And we have sort of that next level of intelligence, which, comes from moving, and it's an emotional territorial intelligence, right? It's like, do I move towards something that I like and move away from something I don't like, right? Which is something plants can do, right? This is something that animals can do. They can move towards and away from different events and different, predators or different mates or any different things. Right? And although, funny enough, they did a study in Italy years ago where they gave plants little robotic bottoms with wheels on them, and then they had different stations around the room, and the plants would actually move around the room and go to the light, then go to the water, then go hang out with some other friends who were stationary, and then if they actually kind of move too, and they gave them that intelligence. Right?
Oh, interesting.
And the second level of what I would call emotional intelligence, which is a limbic system, right? That there's also the triune brain theory, which is disputed a little bit, but also very practical, I think, where we have a reptilian brainstem, right, that governs the physical functions, and then we have a limbic system, which governs our emotional functions, and especially the amygdala, that kind of constantly checks for potential threat and either moves towards something or moves away from something. So that emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And then comes the human part in the sense of semantic intelligence, right? When we started, making words, when we started saying means water, or means run away, there's a saber-toothed tiger. Right?
Right.
To have, words, initially sounds, but then also later written in the sand, and then on papyrus and stone tablets, and today in high-speed networks, we had some symbols that we used to exchange meaning with each other. Right? And this is sort of like the semantic intelligence, and this is where technology has kind of caught up with us. Right? We have robots that are stronger and faster than humans. We have emotional intelligence that can, from your micro expressions in your face or the tone of your voice, detect depression, for example, better than most trained psychologists. Right? We have AI in the sense of semantic models and generative AI in terms of large language models that can put words together much more quickly than most humans can.
Yeah.
And kind of mimic semantic intelligence. But that's the bottom three. Right? Now that technology has caught up with us, I think it's important that we become transrational, I like to call it. We activate the higher circuitry that we also have as humans. Yeah. And that's first and foremost relational intelligence. Relational intelligence is the ability to relate to yourself and to other and to the world. Right? Yeah. And, for example, when you say, hey, how's my body doing right now? You're actually separating yourself from your body and relating to it. Right? Or how am I feeling right now? What am I thinking right now? Right. There's an I there. Right? There's an I with volition. And this is something that separates us from AI. Right? Do we have that? And then, of course, we have these really higher capacities, what the Romans called genius, or the Arab world calls genie, or our creative, or Atman, our soul, whatever you want to call it, our voice, a unique expression. Right? Yeah. Every one of us is unique. Right? We have a unique being, a unique perspective, and unique experiences that we bring to the table. And then we have the capacity to vision, right? We can imagine things that are not there. And I just saw a video with Rick Rubin, the famous music producer, who talked this morning about how what the AI doesn't have, it is not delusional, right? It can't imagine things that are not there. It's built on what already exists.
Yeah.
Right? There's creativity, and coming back to that topic of today, creativity on a combinatoric level. And this is where AI can indeed be creative. It can combine things in a new way, right? Similar to 100 monkeys that can write a novel eventually. Right? But it doesn't have that vision capacity that we have as humans. And then I think we also have this sort of creative intelligence, this part that where we have notions that come to us, hunches in our dreams, in our moments when we actually make room for our genius, where there's inspiration coming in that wants to then express itself through us. So those are kind of the 7 that I usually work with in terms of different intelligences. I think we can practice all of them or can hone all of them. And also I think it's important to pay attention to all of them, especially in the age when people think, oh, we're going to be replaced by AI. And like, dude, A doesn't have volitions, doesn't have consciousness. There's intelligence there, but not consciousness. That's a big distinction.
Yeah.
B, we have all these other capacities that our technology doesn't have yet.
Yeah.
Long intro, forgive me for a moment here, but you asked about it. So here's my version of the one category of intelligences, which I would call individual intelligences. I think there's also interpersonal and innovative intelligences, but that's a different story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good.
I'm overwhelmed and feeling less than a human because I can't sometimes remember even one thing.
That happens to all of us, believe me. It's like if you ask me what I did yesterday, I would actually have to go ask my technology and look at my calendar and be like, hey, what did I do yesterday? What day was it? So
what was interesting about those territorial and emotional, like you spoke something about amygdala, and I'm an expert of status behavior, which is kind of it's connected to power, dominance and submission in mammals, in a flock of seagulls as well in a pack of monkeys, and also us.
Politicians.
So it's like how we are. It has something to do with lots to do with our amygdala area. So it's about like how much space we use with our bodies, and how do we respond to that. So that's something also that AI probably it will be probably maybe getting some.
I mean, there's of course in the virtual world it's a little bit different, but when you think about being in person, one thing that we also pick up on from each other is our electromagnetic field. But if you think about your heart, every time it pumps, it goes boom, boom, boom. It goes boom, 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 boom. Right? So you have, in a way, you have this like torus-shaped electromagnetic field around you. And I think a lot of what we do pick up on that emotional level is that as well. Right? I mean, this is some of the success we've had with hunting in groups, is that we have limbic resonance, right? We have mirror neurons. If something around us is over there, we don't even have to see the person. We kind of sense, we feel them. We feel them there, right? And
well, that sounds like our earlier discussion about positive resonance, like, and love. How it connects, how that resonance, that specific resonance, connects us sometimes.
Especially romance, right?
Well, there's lots of psychologists. Lots of psychologists are saying that love is actually not an emotion. That it's rather a resonance, a shared resonance, positive resonance. But anyways, creativity. I loved the hunch part. Kind of that. I remember it from here when you had this gesture. I kind of loved that one. If we are talking about creativity, because it's like we don't know. There's so many situations where we don't know when we get in touch with our intuition or unconscious side, that we don't know where the idea comes from. It's just a hunch. It's like, oh, could it be like that? And then I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, intuition seems to have been coming up in things I've been reading and seeing lately. This need to reactivate or reconnect to our intuition, that we've lost that connection. And I think about AI, and I think about some of the other things that are going on, and this sort of propensity to put labels on things and divide everything up into little boxes. And yet so much of the work that I do, and I know the two of you do, is about integration, about bringing things together, about the overlap and the relationship between and among things. And that's something to me that AI really doesn't seem to do, and yet it's something that humans can, when they choose to, do pretty well. Right?
I mean, AI is a combinatoric system, and if you think about like the trained models, essentially have a huge matrix of vectors, right? And there's essentially relationships between things that it picks up, but it's very different from a human relating consciously to someone else. And I think that's, for me, also the difference between, we talked about love, the different levels of it, but there's also that, come back to that relational intelligence. If I have a separate I, then I can be in conscious relationship. There's a lot of people who talk about, hey, let's just go irrational again. Let's just feel and sense the world, and I'm like, no, that doesn't work for me. I'm a German engineer, by training. So I'm like, I like to separate things too. And for me, I am separate, right? My yoga teacher used to say, when people talk about oneness, hold on to your wallet and your girlfriend, right? Because we're not all one here, right? And we're all one at the same time, right? So there's this weird, interesting paradox where for me to have an experience, I have to be separate. Right, and at the same time, I'm part and parcel of everything there is. Right, I'm part of humanity. I'm part of life. I'm part of nature. I'm part of the universe. You know what I mean? So I'm still part of everything there is, and I'm separate. Right, and it's this little weird contradiction that we have to handle, but it's also, I think, required for conscious relating. right? Because there's that, the difference in terms of love. If you think about romance or eros, right? That second circuit, emotional territorial, when we feel pulled towards someone, we fall in love with someone, right? That's not conscious love. That's a delusional romantic affliction in some ways, right? Because it's not conscious. We're not accepting. We are having this idea that something else will make us whole. Right? In Plato's Symposion, he talks about how there's one of his get together and drink. Symponine, symposium means getting hammered together, right? Getting together to drink, and then they make stories about eros, right? Or God eros. And one story is that humans used to be this double entity, and then they get too cocky and too powerful that the gods rip them apart, and so now you keep looking for your other half to make you whole again. Right? But for me, that's the romantic delusion: is that something outside of you will make you whole. And this is, why we see a lot of pain in romantic love, and why we also are such victims to marketing, right? Because marketing uses exactly that. It's like, oh, when you buy this car, when you do this thing, when you get this job, then you're going to be whole and everything's going to be fine. Right?
Oh, yeah.
No, that's unconscious relating versus conscious relating, where I accept my separation, right? The semantic circuit. I accept that this is Philip and this is Simo and this is Stephanie, and we're separate. But now we're choosing to be together and relating to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I've noticed since I returned to Canada is all the marketing here. And I don't know if it existed in Germany, and because of the language barrier, I just didn't. And I didn't watch TV in Germany. I didn't have a TV. I stream things once in a while, but I really didn't see advertisements the way, I see advertisements here. If I flip on the TV for a minute, probably I've not actually flipped on a TV program. I've flipped on some commercials, and I'll see the commercials before I even know what the TV program is. But it's always this selling here. This is going to make you better. One of the first ads that caught my eye when I returned was this whole body antiperspirant spray stuff, and I'm like, whole body? Like what the hell is this?
Plug all the pores.
yeah. Like, what is this doing to our bodies, and why does anyone need this? How have we existed for millennia without whole body antiperspirant? Sorry, but it's this idea of filling this need, this you're not complete, without it, and that was one of the reasons why I don't know if I can get.
But it's like I have a different view from love, a more everyday view of love, that we all have it. We'll all, it's like, it's not only the romantic type. It's like we can have love, loving relations with the people we meet. And we are not less or more whole doing that. We are always whole, alone or not. But it's like, yeah, I think that the image that we are being kind of sold about the romantic love is kind of twisted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like what you said earlier about resonance, right? And this goes back to, when you think about these different intelligences, the image I used to use was punch cards. For those of you who are old enough to remember, punch cards is how I used to program computers, and also did, tests in school. Today I use QR code as an experiment at the moment, but imagine we have these different circuits, and every experience you had kind of opens up holes, right? And so, depending on how physically connected you are, you have more or less holes open. Depending on how emotionally connected you are and experiences you've had, you're more or less connected to the emotional intuition. On a mental level, right? The more intelligent you can process symbols and so on. So we open up these holes, and the more we have open, the more we see about the world, and the more, of course, ways we have to judge ourselves too. That's the dark side of it. But then when we resonate with someone, it's because we have mutual holes open, and there's this promise of congruence and complementarity, I always call it, right? We have these same holes open, like we like the same music, or we have some similar values, right? There's some open things that we have both connected. And there's the promise of complementarity, meaning, you have something that is interesting that I can see, that I would like to have it, I don't have open yet. And by having this conversation, I can learn from you, right, for example. Mm-hmm. So there's this love, and I think resonance happens, and I think really that's a beautiful, for me, metaphor for love. I love how you said that earlier, is resonance, right? And that's also why the more complicated you are, the more difficult it is to find a partner, right? If you're really, simple-minded and simple-creatured, then it's much easier. You just pluck your feathers and someone shows up, and then you have a little connection. But the more complicated you get, the more.
And it's also, it's also, I think there's lots of research on the dating apps, and so when that you have, if you live in a small village, you are a complex creature, but you live in a small village, so the options are not so many. There are not so many options for you. But if you are, just swiping Tinder, there are kind of like thousands and thousands and thousands, and that makes it hard too to actually connect with somebody, because it's like, it's like swipe next.
Well, you're looking for Mr. and Mrs. Right? You're looking for the perfect person,
something that
exists, right? And as I said, if you're a small village, you're going to deal with what you have available to you, or you become the medicine man or woman,
Yeah.
Or the artist, but if you want to play the dating game, that's, I think, part of the problem is, this is how these companies make so much money, right? Because they don't want to actually have you meet someone. They want you to keep looking, right? They want you
But maybe AI will change the game, because AI probably can find the one.
Or AI can be the one.
AI can be the one.
There's already a gentleman in Japan who actually married his AI. There's a little thing called Roku. It's a little holographic projection, and he actually had a wedding ceremony with her, because he said that's a perfect girlfriend. Like, she never bitches at him, she never complains, she always sends him little messages while he's at work to say, hey, I can't wait for you to get home. And as soon as he gets home, she asks him how his day was, and he's like, that's a perfect partner. And that's actually that's been happening, right, with character.ai and similar pages where people get lost in characters.
So let's get chipped to be good spouses.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. Well, we wouldn't be surprised if that happens soon enough.
Well, the Handmaid's Tale is closing us.
It is. Absolutely. That's the problem with art, and coming back to our topic of creativity, right? For me, art, intuits future and also creates future, right? Right now, we live in a mixture of Brave New World, 1984, and Fahrenheit 451, and all those, generation of, sci-fi that was out there. And soon enough, it will be Snow Crash and the next level of science fiction, right? But that's the thing about, if I want to build something, the very first thing I have to do, I have to imagine it, right? If I want to build a table, I have to imagine it first, and then I can figure out what it's going to look like. Is it going to be round, square? How many legs is it going to have? And then I can figure out how to, sketch it, maybe figure out what materials I'm going to use, get those and build it. Now, the problem that I see at the moment is that pretty much all of our future visions are dystopian. Right? There's hardly any beautiful image of the future out there. Right? It's all pretty shitty, horrible futures. Either the robots come and eat our face off, or the zombies come eat our face off, or the AI kills us, or some meteor, or some aliens. It's like, there's really practically no positive future vision out there that I know of. And what concerns me about that, outside of the small pockets where I know people are working on regenerative futures.
Well, that sells. Dystopias sell.
Absolutely. Well, fear coming back to that amygdala, that gives you that cool little hormone kick, so that's why, and the thing is, like, you can still have positive future visions, and there still can be drama, right? I think there's still going to be always conflict. Conflict's not going to go away, right? You and I can't sit in the same chair, right? We can't have the same water, but there's going to be conflict over resources or over territory. That's always going to be there, but, we could wrap it into a bit more of a pleasant, present context than we currently choose to. This is when the words of warning become, for self-fulfilling prophecies.
Creativity, AI, us. I have this image stuck in my mind because of this discussion about AI reading. For example, if we imagine that you two guys, Stephanie and Philip, would have like some issue, like a problem or whatever, AI could help you to, read your micro expressions and tell, each of, either one of you that, the other one needs a hug because he needs more oxytocin because she's depressed or whatever. So maybe AI can help us to be better human beings for each others.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
No, I mean, I use it for that purpose already. Like, for example, when I work with teams and we do visioning exercises, for example, and all the team comes up with their visions, we've used it to actually take those visions, feed them all into AI and synthesize it. You know what I mean? Or, you know, I've used it, for example, in sales calls that I've had where I've recorded the call and I've taken this transcript and given it to AI and said, hey, what could I have done better here? Right. And so it can help us moderate for sure, you know what I mean, and be sort of a neutral instance, you know what I mean, in those kind of situations.
Yeah, but what are you losing by feeding it to the AI and saying, here, analyze this for me? What could I have done better? Or what should this vision be? Here are all the bits and pieces. What are you losing out on in the communication, in the relationship building, in the connection building by handing it over to a machine instead of having the possibly difficult conversations about, no, I want this to be the vision. No, that I want that to be the vision, and finding the middle ground, and the loss of
hopefully not even the middle ground, but actually something higher. I think that's the important thing about conflict, right? Is that when we deal with conflict and we hold the contradiction, then something higher and better can emerge rather than a watered down compromise.
Sure.
So I think you're absolutely right. There's a danger of losing things here. I mean, it's always happens with technology, right? Like, for example, if you think about, clothes are technology, right? An extension of our skin. And what happens is we're less resistant to weather than we used to be, right? Or, for example, I grew up being able to read maps really well and have really good sense of orientation. And now when I go somewhere, I check Google Maps 15 times on the way there. You know what I mean? Because suddenly I don't trust my own intelligence anymore, my own intuition anymore.
And still you could do that, but our kids less and less, and their kids
Absolutely.
never.
Yeah.
This is where I'm actually really glad that I'm so grateful that I grew up in the analog. I mean, I was a digital native, an early digital native, and I started programming in 1984, fitting year. I started as an 11-year-old. I learned about computers, and so I was very early in that whole scene. But I'm so glad I learned these basics. I know how to make fire with a stick, which might come in handy if the AI takes over, right? And you have to kind of start over again. But I learned these very rudimentary things. And one thing that I was always a big proponent of is, when we had calculators in school, I said it's important to still learn the basics of how this works. Right? When I came to America first, I had to take business math again, and it was kind of very different level from the math I'd had in Germany. But I remember this one time our teacher said, today we're going to talk about the integral. And I said, oh, that's so cool. I love the integral. It's one of my favorite mathematical concepts. It's the integral, right? Because for those who don't know, you can have a function, and in a function you can look at the derivatives and see where it goes up and down and what it does at different places. And you can use the integral, which is sort of zooming out and saying, what does it cover? Right? And I thought it was always such an important concept, logically and philosophically, to understand the integral. And in this math class, our teacher said, so today we're going to take our calculator out, and we're going to press the function key, and then we're going to have the int key, and then you plug in this function and you hit solve. And I went to my teacher and said, dude, do you not want to teach them about the integral? And he said, they wouldn't get it. And I'm like, seriously? Fuck. I'm like, you have to, at least before you have them use the calculator to use this, explain to them the beauty of this mathematical concept so that they can think for themselves. And I think that's, like similar to your point, I think it's important to teach our children the basics, because right now, I know 2-year-old people who are addicted to YouTube. Right? I have a friend who actually parents about screen addiction.
And that's actually kind of what you are just saying now, Philip. I think that's scary. I mean, if you think of the dystopias like in science fiction, like AI takes over and kills us, or all, that's simple. That's finite, and that's okay. That it's done. It's over. Game over. But what if AI makes us just plain stupid?
The Matrix scenario, right? We become human batteries.
Yeah, the Matrix thing. And I don't know. I mean, the battery thing is already like, that's kind of game over thing. It's almost as good as the dead. But plain stupid, not so creative, trusting the AI like a navigator in your life, like a thought navigator.
it's already happening. I mean, we've already lost against Web 2.0, right? Most people look at their feed and they don't realize that it's curated for them, and it's curated to create emotions, especially upset, and things that really rally you up so that you come in and stay there more longer and spend more time on Facebook. Right? I mean, it's already gearing towards it, and it's already happening. If you look at the elections, around the world, they're being manipulated by AI bots. You know what I mean? That people don't even notice how much they're already being manipulated by that.
Yeah.
And now, when I don't know if you've seen some of those late some full videos out there with like newscasters going, Canada just attacked the United States.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
it's not real because I'm not real, right? There's a whole thing about these different newscasters and crazy scenarios with like some aliens behind them and all kinds of things. And if you don't have media literacy, if you don't understand that every piece of communication has an intention, and if you have not learned to trust your own judgment, because you understand that everything is here to manipulate you, you're fucked. Pardon my English here, but you're totally screwed. Because this is why I talk about relational intelligence and why that's so key, because relational intelligence is also connected to authenticity and self-authoring self. But in the self-authoring self means I am acting based on my values. And Robert Keegan, an American psychologist, he did some research and he found that only 35% of adults have actually reached that stage of adult development. But only 1% are in the self-transformational space. That means 65% of adults are still looking for an external authority to validate them.
Yeah.
So 65% of adults are not actually adults. They're still children, and they're going to be AI fodder. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's like, in other words, where's the functional family? I mean, who has not lived in a somewhat dysfunctional family? And
we all and I mean, everybody has their dysfunctions for sure.
Yeah. So that's scarring us emotionally. That's kind of preventing us to actually to become full adults.
Well, I mean, it's trauma that holds us back. But I always like to say that humans grow like trees, right? We're meant to keep growing and growing and growing and add rings to our life, right? And a tree wouldn't say, "Oh, I think I've grown enough. I'm going to stop growing now," right? I mean, it's going to keep growing and keep doing its thing. But what happens is that all these little traumas from tiny little things, it doesn't have to be like serious trauma, but like little things like your mom didn't come pick you up when you cried, or some kid said you're stupid, or your teacher said you never learn math. Any rejections, or moments of shame and moments of guilt, moments of badness, they hold us back in our development. I mean, this is why learning is always also a process of healing. Right? If I want to learn and expand myself, I also have to look at my shadow. And there's this beautiful quote by Carl Jung who said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Yeah.
This is that part, right? When most people stop learning, stop growing, right? It always it's a bunch of little bonsai trees that are cutting themselves. Please don't grow any bigger. Don't grow any bigger. It's scary out there. I might have shame again. I might have fear again. I might have not knowing again. Right? And so they get smaller and smaller and contract themselves and live very, very small lives. Right? Which is why people stop learning. It's such a pity, right? Because ultimately all life is learning, and you should continue to learn, in my mind. And it's so exciting to learn, right? This is a little bit what we talked about before we came online here, around how we've had these school systems that are full of shame and fear and guilt and bad experiences. So no wonder people don't want to learn anymore. Right? Like 65% of Americans with a bachelor's degree never read another book after finishing their bachelor degree. Right? Because you don't want to learn anymore. It's scary to learn.
Yeah, there's something wrong. So what are the creative acts that we human beings could do to kind of stop this terrible downhill slide? I mean, how could we be creative and counteract?
Well, I think it starts with centering yourself, and for me, but that's why morning rituals are so important. Like every morning, I do something for my body, and I, ground myself in an emotional set point of gratitude, and I shut my thoughts up for a moment to remind myself that I'm the one thinking my thoughts, not the other way around. And then I also do things like just make stupid faces in the mirror, to be silly and dance around the room and do something. So I've already made an asset of myself. So the rest of the day is much easier. You know what I mean? And those kind of little creative acts, I think it starts there. And then I think to what both of you have alluded to as well is to make time for our genius, right? To actually sit for a moment, have an empty piece of paper in front of you, have an empty canvas in front of you, take an instrument to your mouth, and wait.
Have some crayons.
Yeah. Your morning pages.
Morning pages, those things, but allow space for the creativity to come through you. Right? To come back to that intuition, it wants to constantly feed through us. I think in a way we're sort of a twofold system, right? There's always wants to come through us into this reality.
It strikes me that when I ask this question, what could we do? What's the creative act here? It all sounds like taking care of our well-being, our system, taking care of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Sure.
What you were just saying.
Absolutely. I mean, my company, we like to say extreme performance requires extreme self-care.
Yeah.
And I think that's true because in a way, if you think about like this creativity that wants to come through you here, I don't know if you know this Japanese game called pachinko games, right? It's like where the balls come on top and then they're meant to come to the bottom, but then there's all kinds of stuff in the way and they never make it to the bottom. Right? And this is how creativity works too. We all have that openness to it, and there's constantly information feeding through us. It wants to come through us, but either, this is very subtle, this down here is very loud, and in between is a bunch of trauma, right? And so, it just gets stuck. Right? It's like, who am I to do this? Who am I to say this? Am I allowed to say this? Am I cool enough to say this? This is not for me. I've never been good at math. I never could do this. Right? There's always like bullshit that gets in the way of creativity flowing through us. Right? And ideally, I think that self-care is that part of, wiping your slate clean, healing your trauma, right? So that you can become a good vessel for your genius.
Yeah. I think a lot of times when people hear self-care, they think of a spa day, or yeah, they are, but I think it's so much more. It's so much more than that. It's making the space for I have my crayons on my desk, but painting or something where we are building a table or doing something with our hands that gets us out of our heads, right, and into our bodies, into that, touching on that intuition. Okay, what color crayon do I want to pick now? Like, does it feel like, do I feel orange? Yes. No. Oh, maybe no. Maybe I'm blue. And this is the stuff that I do in some of the workshops that I do. Is people will say, "Oh, I'm not an artist. I can't paint." Sure, you can paint, because painting just means putting some paint on the canvas or putting the paint on the wall. That's painting. So we're not here to create the Mona Lisa. We're here to put some paint on the canvas, or draw on the some crayon on the paper. You can do that. It doesn't have to look like anything. It doesn't have to be anything. It just has to be.
Any child can do it. I mean, they do it. Before, they dance before they can stand. They draw, paint before. They can
but children are kind of, with the creativity, they are like, they don't have that much.
They don't have the crap yet. Right? To your earlier comment about the family,
it's missing.
It's saying that it's like the first 7 years are there for our parents to fuck us up, and the rest of our lives is there to heal it. Right?
Yeah,
that's where the material comes from.
Yeah, right? And what I tell people is, like, if Stephanie is prompting people to draw more, I would say let's improvise together and let's and each other's, and that's the way to creativity. Keith Johnstone, who was my improv guru, said that in Western countries we are used to think that children and adults, like the relation between children and adults is that adults are a more developed version, like 2.0 or 3.0 version of a kid. But in creativity, it's vice versa. We are degenerated children.
So there's a beautiful study out there that was done years ago where they looked at children, and essentially all of these 5-year-olds tested on the level, like 98% of them tested on the level of genius. Yeah. And then by the time they were adults, it had reduced itself to 2%. And that's this beautiful quote by Picasso that said that everybody's born an artist, the difficulty is to remain one.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a society, or a small group, or a village, or an entire planet of people who could undo that. I mean, to not build the bullshit, not viewing their. I mean, if
Well,
they
I mean,
could stay.
well, artists are very screwed up people too. I mean, I lived in an art colony in LA for many years.
Well, artists,
Very
that's
awesome, but definitely
artists are.
really good materials to work with.
Yeah, I'm a professional actor, and my healing started when I left acting.
Mm.
It's a sick community, art community in Finland.
It's what's in fifth chakra, right? It's like that self-expression. It's very narcissistic and ego trip and me. Look at me on the stage.
Yeah, and it's needy. It's like
that breakdown, because you still need the approval from everybody.
Yeah,
and then when you break into, this is what Maslow talked about when he originally talked about these different needs. That self-actualization, right? That's the level of an actor, right? Is to incorporate that and be me. But then eventually Maslow said, okay, after that is self-transcendence, right? And this is when life breaks you enough that you at some point realize, that you learn humility, right? And then you become some sort of monk or go into that healing process, where you actually heal yourself from your own narcissistic afflictions.
Yeah. I would love to see a human being growing up like in a way that doesn't need unlearning or healing.
Well, but it is like I've been struggling with that question a lot. Like if we had the perfect education, right, what would happen? And I think the problem is we would miss the material, right? Because most art is made from all the crap. Right? I mean, this is the second process. Here's the creativity process. The other is the alchemical process of turning lead into gold, right? Of turning material experience into beauty, into wisdom, into something higher.
Oh,
so we do need the prima materia. We need some shit. But I think what we can do is teach our children better tools. We can teach them alchemy. We can teach them these tools of how to deal when shit comes up, right, and what to do with the shit and how they can transmute the shit into gold.
It's like kintsugi, the Japanese way of mending the broken porcelain with gold.
Afterwards, it's more beautiful, right?
Yeah.
I do agree.
Yeah. Well, you need to have the dark and the light, right? If it's light all the time, if it's good all the time, then you don't know any difference. And
both. Contrast.
Yeah.
It's like death is life and death. It's like what we started with. It's like we need death to have meaning for life.
Yeah.
And we need our trauma to be. And sometimes, I mean, for example, people who are actually, products of a dysfunctional family could possess superpowers because of that. They could be extra sensitive for a group, like what's going on in this group. And they could scan the group like, okay, now I know. And that wouldn't happen without.
And there's this concept of a wounded healer for a reason, right? I mean, it's always the healing comes after you've healed your own wounds. And I know even like if you think about things like ADHD that we have in our society a lot now, there's people who actually link it to hypersensitivity, and hypersensitivity actually originally comes from trauma, right? Because you've had some separation experiences that made you constantly watch out and constantly be aware of your environment and have a very high situational awareness. This high situational awareness, right, then translates into hypersensitivity and ultimately ADHD if you don't have the tools to frame it properly. Right? This is any artists I know, they're all artists, entrepreneurs like change makers and corporations, activists, other teachers, mentors, coaches, all these people that I've worked with that are all outside the normal operating system. What happened is that they all had very early separation experiences that led them on the path of individuation much earlier than the people who are always doing the right thing. But because if you're always doing the right thing and you always do the proper thing, then there's no resistance for you to grow on, right? And then you have your midlife crisis when you're in your 40s or 50s. At some point you realize, oh shit, I've done everything I was supposed to do in life, and now what, right? But like those people that actually create culture, those are the ones who typically separated early and started that process earlier than others.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I found out that the constant process of healing, like self-healing in life, actually kind of like balances, like getting older, but getting more balanced at the same time. It's kind of a beautiful thing.
I think so too. I mean, I always talk about how I've already come past the halftime of my life, and now every single moment I have is by default becoming more and more precious, because there's going to be less and less of them. Right? And so you take care of your moments much more, and you take care of how you're, surviving here or thriving here, hopefully, right? Moving from surviving to thriving by taking care of yourself. And this comes back to Stephanie's point from earlier, that self-care is not the bubble bath or the spa, but it is was consciously paying attention to your states, right? And really ensure that you keep regulating yourself towards your center.
Yeah.
I really love that. And our time is almost, it's almost done.
Yeah.
But I love what we are coming to. It's like we were earlier talking about building a healthy relationship with AI. But now I feel that prior to that, we should build one with ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And try to actually, try to find out what we need from AI. What is it good for us? And what do we actually need to thrive?
And volition and intention, that's your job. You can't abdicate that to the AI. So this is where you have to start, right, by taking care of yourself. And this is what I mean why we need relational intelligence before we can relate to AI or other people for that matter.
Yeah.
Right? Start with really consciously relating to ourselves first.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And we're just over time, so I'm going to wrap us up there now. But thank you, Philip, for joining us. It's been a great conversation. Maybe we'll have you back again sometime and continue. So Simo and I'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. For all those of you old enough to remember that. And have a great week. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.